yeah, without further ado, I will pass it off to Neil.
Okay, thanks, Josh. Okay, so probably start by letting you just know a little bit about me, but not too much, because you're not interested. Basically, in my practice, I'm a clinical psychologist. I specialize in mood disorders, depression, anxiety disorders, primarily. So this is what I work with every day. And what I want you to be aware of is that while I work primarily with adolescents, I do a lot of adult work and some kid work. Now, the cool part about this format and this number of people, we can actually talk, okay? So I'm not gonna be doing a presentation, okay? I'm gonna be walking through some things like a presentation, but I really seriously want you to interrupt me. Don't save your questions to the end. I'd love this to be back and forth. I'd love you not to wait and then try to remember something from, 30 minutes earlier, what it is you were wanted to ask about. I think you can actually, I don't know if you want to talk about like real personal stuff, but actually application. If you want to talk about, say, okay, I'm wrestling with this thing. What? Any ideas how that would apply? And as much as you want to share, we can talk. Okay, so that's the beauty here. If we had 150 people, it'd be more of a presentation. So as it is this could be kind of fun. This could be like a little workshop, which could be kind of cool. Okay, so here's kind of what we're facing. I want you to try to imagine something. I want you to imagine a bunch of super energetic 2-year-olds. Okay, and I mean high-end energetic. Now I want you to imagine, for some weird, strange reason, some idiot lets them drink coffee. Okay, so now you got energetic 2-year-olds drinking coffee and chocolate. They're just putting chocolate bars all around. Kids are sucking down the Java, and they're eating the chocolate, and they're 2 years old. Now, can you imagine a little bit what this, now, if you had one, what would that be like? 1 2-year-old, coffee, chocolate, we're talking crazy, right? What would happen if you put 3 or 4 of them together in a room? What would happen if you put 20 of them together? Can you imagine the energy? Okay, seriously, what would happen? You put 20 caffeinated, sugared, chocolated 2-year-olds in a room together. What's the variety of things that are going to happen? Come on, somebody. Yeah, you're going to have chaos. You're going to have people hurting each other. What else? Tears. Some kid's going to run over a friend, and the friend's going to cry, and the crying kid's going to make his brother want to cry. So now you got kids over here, crying, and you got another kid running around going crazy, and they're hitting people. You got injuries going on. Probably got paramedics coming in. The energy of the kids bouncing off the kids, and can you imagine what that would look like if you actually did that? 20 caffeinated, chocolated 2-year-olds in one room. Okay. That's kind of what we've been going through with this pandemic. Okay? A little bit different, but here's how it's the same. We have this really interesting thing in us called the empathetic nervous system. Okay? It's a mirror nervous system where basically what it's designed to is to feel what somebody else is feeling, and then you feel it. It's a whole kind of separate nervous system that's part of who you are. It's kind of a cool thing, When your friend's happy, you're happy. You ever walk in a room, everybody's smiling, and you kind of smile, and you don't even know why. It's like, yeah, what are you talking about? And so you feel what other people feel. Well, when it comes to anxiety, okay, we're not talking about 22-year-olds in a room. We're talking about 1 million anxious people in a city. Okay, now think about what we've just gone through. This pandemic hit, and what does the news tell us? They don't say it this way, but you know what they tell us every day? Be afraid. Be worried, be concerned. Be worried, be afraid. You're in danger, you're in danger, you're in danger. Now, they're not doing it to scare us. They're doing it because they think it's going to help us. They're trying to keep us safe. They're trying to keep us not dead. That's a good thing. Okay, but the effect on our nervous system, on this part of us that decides, am I safe, is enormous. And then we start bouncing off each other. We start feeling it from each other. So not only are we hearing be afraid, we are seeing people who are nervous. And we may not want to be, we may not choose to be, we may not even think about it, but we see someone nervous, we get nervous. It was designed like that on purpose. We were given that system to keep us from don't be dead. Okay, dead is bad, so we'll give you this system that if people around you are afraid, you'll get afraid, because if they're afraid, there's probably something wrong and you need to be safe. So if there's a bear and people next to you are afraid, you don't want to miss it. And so you notice they're afraid and your system turns on and everybody doesn't get eaten by the bear. That's a good thing. Okay, but when it's a pandemic and there's no bear to run from, and that thing just stays there and it cooks. This anxiety in us has been cooking for months. Okay? Have you noticed people feel like they're driving like kind of a little bit obnoxiously? And there's more emotion and people are getting upset and just little things. I'm not talking about, like something dangerous, right? But we're just talking about everybody just seems a little bit more reactive. That's what's going on. Okay, so what that basically means is if you were anxious before, you're more anxious now. If you weren't anxious at all, maybe a little bit. And if you were right on the edge, maybe just a little bit nervous, but I don't get anxious, this would be enough to kick you over the top. So there are people dealing with anxiety that have never dealt with it, and they may I have nothing to be anxiety about, I don't care about COVID. It doesn't matter what you tell yourself. Let's go into this. Okay, this thing we are talking about here. Oh, come on. Give me a break here. Doug, I told you I love computers, but they don't love me. Yeah, it was just working, wasn't it? You saw it, didn't you? I'm not crazy. Okay. You guys have 2 seconds here. I can mess around with this. Let's just start over. I can do that. Here we go. See? There we go. Okay. So, most of you have heard fight, flight, or freeze. Okay? Basically, this is a thing. It's a system in our body. It's the most powerful single system we have in our entire body. It's more powerful than reproduction. It's more powerful than getting food. It's the big kahuna. And it makes sense because it's about not dying. Okay, all the other stuff, you can't get food and you can't reproduce if you're dead. Okay? So it's very helpful and it's a very good thing. It's what keeps us alive. Anxiety is when that sucker gets activated, but there's no threat. It's when it's turned on, maybe even left on, and there's no threat that you can see and point to. There's no bear. There's nobody trying to hurt you. Okay? So you want a simplest definition of anxiety you can think of. It's fight, flight, or freeze turned on when there's no threat. Okay? And it is a very, very physical system. But there's one thing I really wanted to point out. There's basically, I'm going to make this super simple. There's front half of your brain and the back half. Let's just go with that. The front half is where you do your thinking. Okay, your conscious thought, where you do your deciding, where you do your logic, where you look at facts. Back half, subconscious. Okay? Sympathetic, which means you don't control it. Okay? It's where anxiety comes from. I thought it was a really interesting little point it made was you will feel anxious before you know you're anxious. And why? Because the anxious, they've hooked our brains up to things. They watch this happen. The anxiety response happens before it hits the front half of your brain. Okay? So if people just tell you, well, just don't worry so much. Just don't be so anxious. It doesn't work like that. And if anybody's experienced anxiety, which is me, by the way, it's not that simple. Okay? All right, so just so you know, the types of clinical anxiety, I don't know, the only reason I thought you might want to know that would be, maybe you could recognize something as, oh, that's anxiety. So generalized anxiety, that's just a general sense of anxiety. Panic attacks, that's just another kind of fight, flight, or freeze response. It just looks a little different. Phobias, including social anxiety, same thing. Comes out of the same place. It just looks a little different. PTSD and obsessive compulsive disorder. All of them are responses to a feeling of threat coming out of, we're going to call the back half of your brain, the part that runs the anxiety response. I'm going to use the phrase limbic system. Okay, it's about 4 structures together that create the fight, flight, or freeze response. Okay, the limbic system has its own play in what it does. All of those are caused by an overactive limbic system. Okay, any questions about this stuff so far? I know it's just information. We haven't got into the good stuff yet, but you got to get the background stuff to understand what do we do with it. Okay? All right, let's keep going. All right, so where's this stuff come from? Well, pandemics would be one thing, okay? But we're gonna go beyond that. All right? So some people are just born with a limbic system that's just touchy. Your limbic system is just hair trigger, just like some of us have bad eyesight and bad knees and whatever. Some people, this part of their brain just reacts too quick and too fast and stays on too long. Okay? So, reasons for that: genetic predisposition, prolonged stress or perceived threat. You go through threat for a long enough time, your limbic system says, well, I guess the world's dangerous, let's just leave it on. And so if you experience some kind of a sense of safety loss over and over and over and over, after a while your limbic system just says, no reason to turn it off, might as well just leave it on. Okay? Anybody been through a pandemic lately? Kind of extended stress? Nobody? Anybody? Previous trauma? Okay? Sometimes the trauma you experience is so bad and so dramatic that your limbic system can't reset. Okay, so that's where PTSD comes from. Okay? It can come from conscious thoughts. You can think your way into anxiety. Okay? So that's another source. So not only what our limbic system is doing subconsciously, but what the front half of your brain is doing in terms of what you believe. And now you may not know what those beliefs are, and sometimes they're a couple layers down, but often there's some kind of belief behind anxiety. What's going to happen? What bad would go on? Why would that be so bad? Okay? Real or imagined, serious, trivial, it doesn't matter. When it comes to thoughts, it's not what the threat is, it's what the belief is. Okay? Let me give you an example. Let's say I close those doors. And we were doing our seminar. About halfway through, I had kind of set this up. It's a little bit of a thing I had going. It was a trick. I had Doug come up and kind of pretend like he'd just gotten a text and said there was a wild animal out in the lobby out here. Somehow a cougar or a bear got loose out there, and that he wanted all of us to stay here until given the go. And I said, well, I am so sorry. We'll just stay here. It'll be okay. And Doug said, no, this is serious. I've got the police is coming. We've got 911. I said, okay. So we kept going. About 30 minutes later, the seminar was over. Doug hasn't given us the all clear, but I said, okay, everybody, got to go. We got to clear out the church. How you feeling about going out that door? Probably a little bit nervous. Okay, but then, so say everybody got up, they started walking. I go, wait, hold it. You've just been part of an experiment. There really was never a bear. And we had Doug come up, he goes, no, I never had a text. This was all part of a psychological experiment. Of course there's not a bear out in the lobby. I got a bear getting out of the lobby. And so he said, okay, everybody go. How are you feeling now? A little better. Maybe you're looking a little suspicious. Like, I don't know if I trust you. But at least better, right? Here's the point. It's not whether there's a bear in the lobby that makes you anxious. It's what you believe. We get caught up in thinking anxiety comes from whether there's a threat or not. Anxiety doesn't come from whether there's a threat or not. It comes if you believe there's a threat. Okay? One of my favorite stories, BC, about 4 years ago. A guy heard it. It was a suburb up in kind of the main city in British Columbia, but kind of in the wooded area, kind of pushing up against the woods. And his doorbell rang. Went to the doorbell, opened the door, and a grizzly bear attacked him. In a neighborhood. We're not talking one of those country homes. Okay? When he was going to that door, he was not anxious. The doorbell rang. The best they could figure is bear absolutely bumped into the doorbell. Just wandering around the neighborhood and just one of those weird coincidences, right? Now, he got attacked. He lived. So I'm imagining, kind of fun, but kind of feel embarrassed that I think these kind of things, but I'm imagining the next time the doorbell rings when he gets home from the hospital. What's going on? Is that heart going? Is he telling himself there's no bear, but when he's opened that door, is he kind of, he goes, there can't be a bear, but I think probably every time for the next 6 months that doorbell rings, his heart beats a couple extra beats. It's not whether it's out there or not, it's what you think. Okay? Subconscious physiological triggers. This gets a little tricky. I'm going to tell you a story about how this kind of works. About 2 weeks ago, I was out running my dog in a big field, and I got stung by a hornet. I was just walking along and looked down on my hand, a big old hornet sitting right there, and before I could even get rid of it, it stung me. Well, I don't get reactions from bee stings, but I did. Like, my whole hand was like this big. And it hurt for about 2 days, and then it itched for another week. Okay, now, about 4 days ago, I was out in my backyard, and I was using the power trimmer, trimming my lawn, and a little piece of grass, just that big, landed on the other hand right there. And without even thinking, I had an anxiety response. I went like this. I dropped the weed eater and scraped a piece of grass off my hand because it vaguely reminded my limbic system of what it looked like when that hornet was on the other hand. That's all it was. It was no logic. I didn't look and go, hey, I wonder if there's a hornet. I was reacting before I even knew what I was doing. Okay, so there are times when your limbic system is going to do things that just vaguely associate with things that have been threats in the past. They're kind of the same. And you're going to get an anxiety response, and it may not be the same. You know that, but your limbic system, let me get this clear, your limbic system is stupid. Okay? It doesn't have access to the smart part of your brain. It's the dumb part of your brain. And so it isn't thinking things through very well. It just says things. It's just like if you had, why does that thing keep going off, Doug? Is that me? You don't know. It's just technology hates Neil, right? Is that it? Thank you, by the way. So you get the idea here? That there are times you're going to have an anxious response and you're just going, I have no idea where that came from. And it could be something that just vaguely reminded the back part of your brain about something that was bad that happened. Okay? All right, let's keep going. Personality type. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but there are 5 basic personality types, and one of them has a tendency to be more anxious. Okay? So that's just sometimes it's how you're born. You have a personality type, and your personality type gets a little more anxious than other people. Okay? All right, let's keep going. Now, here's what happens inside your body when you're anxious. Okay? So it starts. You get hormones firing through your blood. Adrenaline and cortisol. You hear me mention cortisol. You know what adrenaline is. Cortisol basically is, its basic function is to release sugar. Okay, it dumps sugar throughout your body in order so you can run or fight. Okay? You get respiration and circulation changes. It shuts down non-essential physical systems. You hear him talking about your digestive system turns off. You know, that's why people who are anxious feel a little queasy or a little funny in their stomach. Okay, that's your digestive system kind of turning off. Going, okay, we don't need you right now. Okay, this is about life and death. That's why we have this system. You got to keep telling yourself that. Okay? You get neurological adaptations. That's a cool way of saying your brain changes. Okay? It shuts down non-essential brain pathways. Okay, now, that word non-essential, if you understood what your back of your brain is thinking isn't essential, you're going to get irritated. Okay? The back of your brain, for example, thinks the front of your brain isn't necessary. It figures you don't need to think too much. In fact, it doesn't want you to think too much. okay? Because if you think too much, you're not reacting. Remember that picture of that guy and the bear? If he thought about that too long, he's dead. By the way, I don't know how that turned out. I'm always curious whether that guy lived or not. Okay? Okay? Your memory system. That's not essential if you're running from a bear, is it? In fact, if you start trying to remember stuff, it's going to slow you down. Okay, now I just want you to think about those two. Front part of your brain where all your higher thinking is going on. The memory system, thing called the hippocampus, kind of runs the memory. Both of those kind of get the volume turned down. Let me ask you a question. How good is that for either doing work or school? Performing at work or school with your higher level thinking turned down and your memory turned down. How good are you going to be in class? How good are you going to be performing your job? So anxiety, I cannot tell you how many kids I've talked to who think they're stupid and found out they weren't stupid, they were anxious. They would go and they couldn't get good grades on a test. And what we found out, it wasn't that they couldn't get good grades on a test, it's that when they're in anxiety, they can't use the parts of their brain they need to use. Okay? So like I said, I get irritated at the limbic system. I wouldn't be friends with it. Okay, so now we're getting a little more practical. How do I know if I have anxiety? All right, let's take a look. Now, by the way, this might be a good place to start asking questions. If you have a friend or somebody you're going, okay, I'm kind of concerned about somebody, or I'd like to, is this symptom, is this a part of anxiety? This is where I want you to be able to apply what's going on here. So I want you to start thinking here, okay? All right, physiological, symptoms in your body. Shakiness, restlessness, fidgetiness, okay? I mean, imagine someone dumped a bunch of adrenaline and sugar into your bloodstream. What are you going to be doing? Okay? That shakiness, restlessness, fidgetiness, it's not an accident. It's intended. Okay? Inaction, inertia, and passivity. Okay, that can come from two different places. It can come from that freeze response, that too much input, too much, you become super hyper alert. And so what happens is that you become frozen. It also can come from being afraid to make a mistake, afraid to fail. When you're anxious, you're thinking about all the bad things that can happen. And so you freeze because if I do this, I can go wrong. If I do this, I'm going to... it's like, if you've ever been in a crowded room of people you don't know very well and you're afraid to talk because you think anything you say will sound stupid. Okay, you become kind of frozen in action because you don't want to make a mistake. Heart pounding, flush. Your heart pounds for a simple reason. Get the blood, get the oxygen to the muscles so you can fight for your life. The flush feeling, your blood vessels, some of your blood vessels expand. Some of them contract in order to get blood to the right places so that you can fight or run. And so part of what people feel a lot of times is hot. Some people feel cold. Shallow or restricted breathing. All right, how many people here have seen a scary movie? Wow, okay, good. It was going to scare me if no one else watches scary movies. Okay, classic scene, any scary movie you've probably ever seen. The person who's the good person who's trying to get killed is hiding in a closet, okay? You know this scene, right? Every scary movie has it. They're in the closet. Whatever bad is out there trying to get them is walking around the house trying to get them. They're in the closet, hiding behind, of course, there's never a solid door. There's always those slat doors, which is just like, what houses make those anyway? That's like, who hides behind them? But anyway, so you're sitting in there. How do they breathe? What's breathing like? You're doing it. What is it? You don't have to do it for us, but what were you doing? Yeah. Yeah, but it tends to be a little rapid. You weren't just going nice and calm. It was this rapid, shallow breathing. Okay? That's not something we do on purpose. That is your limbic system trying to get you to hyperoxygenate your blood. Okay? Remember, what do they tell you if you're overoxygenated? You breathe slow and deep. Your limbic system's trying to get you over-oxygenated, okay? You're going to fight a bear. You're going to need the oxygen, okay? So that feeling that people get, often they get this heavy feeling in their chest. That's literally the muscles around your lungs compressing, trying to get you to breathe short and shallow, okay? Stomach, butterflies, nausea, we talked about that. Exhaustion, and a thing called adrenal fatigue, where basically if you're anxious a lot, your system is dumping out adrenaline constantly. After a while, it runs out of adrenaline. And then you're so used to operating off adrenaline, when the adrenaline drops off, you're exhausted. And you're just tired. Okay, never thought of that as a symptom of anxiety, but it is. Okay, cognitive symptoms. What's going on between your ears? By the way, any questions on this stuff? Application, how it might fit? You guys are so quiet, it's making me nervous. Okay, all right, I'll keep going. All right, so between your ears, here's what happens. Uncontrollable, fearful expectations. What's that first word I put up there? Uncontrollable. Okay, how many people have heard somebody tell somebody with anxiety, either you're the person being told this or you've heard someone say this, well, just don't worry. Okay, this is uncontrollable. This is coming out of the back part of your brain, not the front part. You can't just not worry, not with anxiety. You can with some other things. You can not worry about all kinds of stuff. But when you have clinical anxiety, it's coming out of the back part, not the front part. Okay, so you worry about things going wrong, not because you're a worrier, but because your subconscious is telling you what to think. Okay? Let me see if I can clarify this. Anybody watch a show called Alone? Okay? Oh man, am I the only one? It's one of those survival shows where they take 10 people, and right now they're in BC. Well, the last season they were in BC. And they all get spaced about 1 kilometer apart, and then they have to try to survive, and they go into winter, and there's 10 people, and the last one that's out there gets $500,000. Okay? So these people are dead serious, right? So like they're in this, they're in freezing cold temperatures, they're starving to death, and they are not going home because it's $500,000. Okay? You can imagine the motivation. So now, you got these people literally starving to death. And every year, I've watched every season so far, I don't know why I like it. They always say the same thing. When they get towards the 2 to 3 month mark, and they're literally skin and bones, they are constantly thinking about food. Not on purpose. In fact, they know it's wrong. They know that if they think about food, it's going to make it harder for them to stay. Their back of their brain is shooting visions of food into their head, saying, you got to go get some food. You're starving to death. Go find some food. They said they dream about food. They'll lay down and close their eyes, and they'll see a table with food. And they're trying not to do that. But the back part of their brain says, you want to eat. And so it's doing whatever it can to get them to go find food. That's what happens with anxiety, except it's not food. Okay, it's whatever bad can happen. Your brain is constantly telling you that, and it's not your choice. Okay? All right, emotional reactivity. This one I want you to hear, anger. Emotional reactions that are too intense for the context. It could look like a teenager who you just tell them, you just say, hey, have you done your homework? And the kid starts yelling at you. It's like, where did that come from? What was it? It was just out of control. It wasn't just, oh, Mom, leave me alone. It was just this explosive anger. And even there you go, you even ask them, well, why are you so angry? I don't know. Just when you say that, it just makes me furious. And they couldn't even tell you why. Okay? So any kind of reaction that's too intense for the context can be anxiety. They're not always anxiety, but it can be. Okay? Difficulty with higher cognitions and memory. Okay? That's the classic kid who says, I studied, and I went in and I sat down and I couldn't remember anything I studied. Okay? That'd be a really good example of that. And then hyper-alertness. You're just always aware. You're always looking out the corner of your eyes. You're always a little bit nervous. You're always trying to think of what's going on around me. Okay? Just super alert. Okay? Tunnel vision or derealization. That doesn't happen a lot, but I've had a lot of clients come in and they're kind of freaked out by it. They wonder if they're going crazy. They feel like they're kind of away from their body. And it's basically just their body's way of saying, this hurts too much. Why don't you get some space between you and reality because it's too painful. Okay, so if you ever have somebody tell you, I just feel like I'm kind of spaced out, or I feel like I'm kind of away from myself sometimes, And it could be an anxiety symptom. Okay? All right. Impaired functioning. By the way, if you want to know exactly how the easiest way to diagnose clinical anxiety, it's in functioning. It's not in your symptoms. Okay? So, social dysfunction. Family, peers, social behavior, social withdrawal, shrinking social circle, work or school dysfunction, focusing, concentrating, memory issues, test performance, homework performance. Okay? Those are indicators. The sleep. Guess why sleep? Someone's got to come up with this. Why would sleep difficulty be part of anxiety? Come on. Yeah, that's actually, you are correct, but that's not the answer I was looking for, but you are right. You constantly are thinking about things. You're thinking about things that go wrong. What about the limbic systems? What do you think the limbic system thinks about sleep while you're anxious? Yeah. Remember, it thinks you're about to get killed. Okay, it's stupid. How good would it be for you to go to sleep if there's a bear wandering around? So you are pre-designed to not sleep while you're anxious. Some people can pull it off, but it'll take hours. Like you'll lay there in an hour and you can't go to sleep. You see that a lot in kids. It's like, I don't know why, my kid every night, they go to bed at 9:30 and they don't get to sleep till 1. And it's like, I think they're just watching social media, and a lot of times they're not watching social media. That's not why they're staying awake. They're watching social media because they can't go to sleep. They're trying to turn off their mind, which is doing what you thought, which is racing around thinking of bad things. Okay? All right. Last area, coping behaviors. These are things that people do to try to deal with it. All right? Avoidance. Flight from anxiety-provoking experiences. The number one in this area is procrastination. Okay? I can't tell you how many people with anxiety come to me and they say, I'm lazy. And I say, why are you lazy? And they say, well, I just feel terrible. Because I'm supposed to be doing these projects, or I'm supposed to be doing this schoolwork, or I got this work thing I should have been doing, and I always seem to put it off. And I wait till the last second, and then right at the last second I try to do it, and I feel so bad afterwards. And I look at them and I say, you're not lazy. And they go, well, how do you know? I said, well, lazy people, when they get out of work, they go, great, I got out of work. They don't feel bad. Okay, lazy people are glad to get out of work. They're celebrating the fact that they skipped their homework. They're not feeling bad about it afterwards. So the difference between anxiety and lazy, you can do a real quick little way to know is the person feeling horrible afterwards. Okay? If they feel horrible, it ain't lazy. Okay? Control behaviors. By the way, gaming, social media, that's you were talking about the thoughts going around your head. That's how people who are anxious get away from it. Okay, that's kind of a popular one now. Control behaviors are common in children. They're common in adults too, but they're an issue with children. Adults can just be controlling, and that's kind of a quirk, right? Children are controlling, and they're disobedient. Okay, and so you get a lot of kids who don't want to be bossed around and told what to do, and I'm sure some of them are just obnoxious, but some of them are anxious. And having people tell you what to do feels unsafe. The more control you have, the more you get to direct yourself, the safer you feel. And so there's a lot of people who hate to be told what to do and want to be in control, not because they're control freaks, but because it feels safer. And they have less anxiety when they control things. Okay? Again, one of those things you don't want to label yourself or somebody else with too quickly. Maybe they're not controlling, maybe they're afraid. And that's how they're coping with it. Okay? You'll see it in transition, changes, choices. I can't get my kid to pick. Every time we change the kind of what we're doing, the plan, my kid really responds really negatively. Okay? So people who have to plan out the next day, and they don't want things to change. Okay, when I was going through my worst of my anxiety, I had the exact same thing for breakfast every morning. And it was simply a way that I didn't have to make choices. Every morning I knew I was getting up, I was making a coffee, I was having the same granola every morning, the same yogurt every morning, because choices were just, I hated them. And so I just made my morning exactly the same, and that felt better. Okay? Okay. Self-medicating behavior, drugs, alcohol, food, etc. Okay, the same system, the dopamine system that makes you feel so bad in anxiety is the same system that drugs, alcohol, and food kick up. And so you're going to have a lot of people who use those things to kind of try to level out how they feel. And it works very briefly. Okay, so they're actually right. They're hitting the right neurochemical. It's just not a long-term solution. Okay? Questions so far? Anything? Oh, man. Either I am doing a great job or I'm missing something. How about that? Do you like that picture? Come on, just look at that. Okay, I just love that. I came across that. Classic. Okay, if you're going, okay, my kid has anxiety, or I think I have anxiety, or my wife does, or I know somebody who does. Okay, this stuff is treatable. Okay, it's not easily treatable. It's not something you just fix with a couple of quick sayings, have them read a little pamphlet and now they're better. Okay, because it's complex. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a big, powerful system behind it all. Okay, but it is treatable. Okay, so let's talk about what do we do. What I'm going to do is we're going to work this on triggers, causes, whatever you want to use that phrase for. And then, okay, if I have this kind of a cause, this kind of thing that triggers my anxiety, well, what can I do? Okay, so we're matching them. So the first few are the big ones, and then we're going to talk about some small ones. So key triggers. Avoidance. Okay, how do I explain this to you? I told you that the limbic system is stupid, right? All right, and the limbic system, weirdly enough, doesn't have an easy way to know if you're really being threatened. Because remember, it doesn't get access to the smart part. So it doesn't get a look into your brain and go, what are the threats in the room? I know that's not a threat. I know that's not. It just has these things that it kind of, over the years, it kind of picks up little clues, and it uses little things like, it's weird, the kind of stuff it looks at. Here's just an example, probably wouldn't apply here, might. It looks at your face. Okay, no kidding. They did studies. I don't know why scientists have time enough to do these kind of studies. But they did studies. They hooked people up to all these electrocardiogram, that'd be their heart, but brain stuff. And then they said, okay, we want you to make a little bit of an anxious face. And what that is, it's kind of a combination of your eyes widening just slightly, but your brows kind of going down at the same time. So it's kind of a widening and a narrowing. If you want to think of that little baby. Let's see, oh, there he is. Yeah, I can see they're kind of that. Okay, so they had people do that on purpose, and they gave themselves anxiety by putting an anxious look on their face. The limbic system saw the anxious look and said, something must be bad. You could also make yourself anxious if you wanted by breathing short and shallow. If you just started breathing like that, some people get panic attacks when they start breathing that way. Okay? The limbic system is not smart, but all it can do is kind of look for cues and clues. Now, one of the clues it uses that you need to know is avoidance. You avoid something. I mean, think of yourself as a stupid limbic system. And the person you're walking around in avoids something. What do you think? We don't avoid stuff that's good, do we? Kind of makes sense. How it's supposed to work is like this. Let's say we were all out on a nice nature hike, all of us. We're walking along and there's a cave up in front of us. We go, oh, that looks like a cool cave. And we start walking toward it, and then we listen and we can hear noises inside the cave, like animal noises. And so we all go, I'm not going next to that cave. And so we all walk around. We avoid. Okay? Once we avoid, the limbic system says, danger. And so the next time you see a cave, you'll get a little nervous. Noises in there? You may have seen 1,000 caves in your life. One cave, one animal noise, could have been just a big rabbit or something. And your limbic system now is nervous around caves because you avoided. Now, if you had walked up and said, hey, animal noises, let's go find out. Walked into the cave, oh, look at that, it's a badger. The limbic system wouldn't have responded. You would have died, the badger would have killed you. But the limbic system would have been happy because you would have told it by approaching that that's not a threat. So can you imagine the applications of that if you're trying to get over anxiety? You can teach your limbic system. The way I tell my people, I said, you can talk to your limbic system. Now, you can't talk English or French, okay, but you can talk limbic. Limbic has a language. And one of its languages is approach or avoidance. And so you can tell it it's not a danger. You can tell it to not be anxious by showing it. See, I'm going toward it. This is not dangerous. See, I'm going the other direction. This is dangerous. That's how it talks. Okay? You just said all that. Here's just a little say. Avoiding the anxiety increases the anxiety. Kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Now, here's where it gets really tricky. Not just actions, but your thoughts. Okay, anybody here, when they have something stressful coming up, decide to try not to think about it? Okay, I'll raise my hand. No one else? No one else tries to? Well, I got at least two of us. Okay, two of us. Three of us are finally being on it. Whenever something's stressful, we don't like to. It drives my wife nuts, Denise. Like, I'll have something stressful come up. She goes, okay, Neil, are you thinking, how's this your preparation for your talk? And I go, I don't want to talk about that. She goes, well, what's wrong? And it's just my way. When I'm nervous, if I think about it, it makes me nervous. Kind of makes sense, right? But guess what my limbic system thinks when I do that? You're avoiding. You don't even want to think about that. How dangerous is that you're not even going to let it in your brain? So you avoid thinking about it. It increases the anxiety. And now I'm going to get really weird. No, I'm not going to get weird, but it's a weird reaction to the limbic system. Limbic system's other job is to make sure you pay attention to what's dangerous. Why would that be? Why would its job to say, make sure you pay attention to danger? Practical application. Terror. You're walking along in the woods, you hear noises up in the woods, you think maybe it's a bear, you say, okay, we're not going up that direction, let's go that way. You go on your nice 2-hour hike, you start coming back. If you forget the bear was up there, maybe you go up there. So it tries to make sure you remember dangerous stuff. So now, let's put these two weird things together. You try to avoid a thought. It tells your limbic system that thought is dangerous. The thought is dangerous. Now the limbic system says, I don't want to let you forget it. Think about that for a minute. You avoid a thought because it's uncomfortable. Your limbic system tags it as dangerous. Because it's tagged it as dangerous, it will not let you forget the thought. You will lay awake at night and think about things. Because your limbic system's saying, I'm not letting you forget that. That's dangerous. Okay, so the very thing you're trying to do, avoid the thought so you don't feel anxious, is not just, it's doing the reverse and the worst. Okay? So weirdly enough, you can think about it, there could be applications to that, couldn't there? Okay? We already talked about procrastination versus laziness. All right, here's what you can do. Okay. You got to start by just being open and honest, both yourself and the people with you. Okay, if it's a child you're worried about, or a partner, or a friend. Okay, hiding anxiety makes it worse. Okay, so you just be honest and call it what it is. There's a cheesy, psychologist saying name it to tame it. Okay, and so basically the idea is you name anxiety and say, okay, you're feeling anxiety right now, aren't you? Instead of just pretending or kind of just understanding. So if it's a kid you're talking about, you just be open. Okay, what you're feeling right now is some anxiety. Okay? Okay, second, push through the anxious feeling. Okay, so if you have an anxious feeling about thinking about something, you do the opposite of what you think you should. You push through it. You approach it. Okay, so I'm talking about not only things like, things you should be doing. I'm talking about thoughts. You're worried about a presentation at work in a week? Don't put it out of your mind. Spend some time and go through it. Consciously think about it. Show your limbic system you are not afraid of this. Okay? Don't avoid. Okay? So that feeling, whether it's, I'll give you another example. This is a classic. Everybody's felt this one. We'll use students as the example here. Let's say you got a kid who's got a big project due on Monday. take about 3 hours. It's Friday after school. You're anxious. Kid is anxious, I mean. What are they doing with that project? They working on it Friday afternoon? Does any of your kids work on a project Friday afternoon? What kind of weird kids do you have? Nobody does that, okay? What they do is they try, if they're anxious about that project, they wait. When do they usually wait till? Absolutely, that's classic, right? It's not because they're lazy, it's because they're anxious and thinking about it, so they've been trying to avoid it all weekend. Okay, if you want to not feel anxious, okay, I want you guys to see if you can come up with this answer. It's Friday afternoon. You got a project due Monday. But you don't want to spend all Friday doing your homework. You just got done with school. It's Friday night, let's say. Somebody doing school. How could you use push through to make you less anxious about that project? Think about it. What could you do? Use the principle. Apply it. Okay, one would be to get it done. 3-hour project, and if you're willing to work on a Friday night, more power to you. I'm impressed. I was anxious, but I was also a little bit lazy. So just being honest. Yeah, it's way worse, isn't it? Okay. How about this idea? What would it tell the limbic system if Friday afternoon you broke out the project and worked on it for 10 minutes, first thing? Just 10. What would it tell the limbic system? Not dangerous. You jumped right to it. You didn't even wait till Friday night. If you get after it, if you do it first thing, even if you don't want to work on it at that point, if you're going, I don't want to do my homework on Friday afternoon, I just got off school. Fine, do 10 minutes. What it does is it tells the limbic system you're not avoiding it and that it's not a danger. Okay? You'd relate to this, Rob. I used that in my PhD dissertation a ton. Whenever I had a whole bunch to do and I felt overwhelmed, I go, okay, I'm doing 10 minutes and then I'm turning it off just so I won't be nervous. Okay? Okay. This is kind of the same thing, gradual or early exposure. Gradual exposure is what we do with phobias. Okay, anybody know what gradual exposure is? Let's say you're afraid of spiders. What would be the way to get over your phobia of spiders? Don't throw spiders on the person. That is not what we're talking about. Okay, some of you are thinking that'd be fun, but no, that's not what you do. What would be the way to do it? What's that? Now, it would make me smile, and actually, he's onto something. You start by singing the Itsy Bitsy Spider, just a little. And then maybe you show him a picture of a spider across the room. And then you show him the picture of the spider a little closer, a little closer. And then you go outside and say, there's a spider over there on the other side of the parking lot. It's way over there. And you work your way gradually towards your phobia. Okay? Same principle works with exposure to things we're anxious about. Okay? So if you're anxious about going back to school, anybody have any kids anxious about going back to school? Okay, good. Anybody anxious about going back to, I don't mean school, but like, I'll be really honest, I worked out of my basement for mostly about a year. I did some work in the office for a little period of time when we all thought the pandemic was over, and then I had to go back. Okay, when I came back to the office for the first time, I was nervous. I don't know why. First day back to the office. Okay, it was like first day of school. I was just anxious. Okay? Guess what the best way to handle that is? Don't think about school at all. Don't mention it. And then the morning of school, yell at your kids to get up and go to school. How about, what would be a way to do gradual exposure for a kid at school? What would be the first step? Wouldn't be to wait till first day of school. How about drive the kid by school? Maybe you go sit in the parking lot. Maybe a couple days later, a week later, you go to school and you take a walk around. You know, maybe the night before, you go visit, go look in your classroom, peek in the window. Okay? That's how you get over it, not avoiding. Okay? Some cases, just jumping right in is great, but in some cases, that gradual exposure is the best way to help somebody get through their anxiety. Okay? All right, let's keep going. We talked about our beliefs. Remember we said it's not whether the threat is real, but whether we believe it's real. If we believe the threat is real, limbic system ramps up the fight or flight freeze response. So if you believe, it goes up. It's kind of, I like to think of it like this. Campfire, end of the night. Time to turn the campfire off, right? Well, put it out. Okay, Smokey the Bear and all that. Okay, you put some water on it and some gas. No. Okay, if you believe your fears, it's like putting gas on it. Okay, so you got to think through, what am I really believing about what I feel? I'm afraid right now. I'm afraid something bad's going to happen. Do I believe that? Do I really believe that bad thing is going to happen? Okay, so here's what you can do. Don't trust your feelings. Okay, the worst bumper sticker in the history of mankind, the most damaging poster ever hung on a wall, the most horrible saying ever created by man, the most damaging thing I can think of is trust your feelings. Okay? Folks, no. Not even if you don't have anxiety. Your back part of your brain is stupid. You are trusting that part when the front part of your brain's got all the smarts? And you're going, well, if I got a feeling, I'm just going with it. Like, yeah, I guess it's right sometimes. You know, so's a broken clock and a blind squirrel. You know, he finds a nut every once in a while. But just because your feelings occasionally were right doesn't mean you trust them. Okay, we went from a culture, when I was a little kid, when no one even knew what they were feeling. I went to a men's retreat once where we were taught the 4 basic emotions: happy, mad, glad, and sad. I'm not kidding. That was the agenda. Because men didn't feel, right? Okay, to now, we're following around our feelings like we're a puppy dog, and it's telling us what to do. Okay, we got to swing back a little bit more in the middle. You know, we don't have to go back to the 50s. That was kind of frightening, but we can find that middle ground where feelings don't tell us what's true. Okay? Intentionally engage this front part of your brain. I call it the executive function, but focus on facts. Use that front part of your brain and do it purposely. Go, okay, back part of my brain is telling me what I'm feeling right now. And I'm feeling like this is going to be terrible and something bad's going to happen. And holy smokes, I don't even have any idea how that is. Oh, here, good, we're at the start. Okay, well, I'll keep talking while I'm working my way forward. I told you, Doug, me and technology. Now I even lost where I was. What was I talking about? Okay. Yeah, here's the thing. What you have to do is learn that you can feel something and believe something just the opposite. Your feelings are not your beliefs. You can choose a feeling, a belief, and you can choose a belief that's the exact opposite of what you feel. Okay, I feel like if I say something out loud right now in this group, they're all going to think I'm stupid. But I'm looking around right now and I'm seeing how kind people are and how they're treating each other. And the fact is, I believe they would actually be nice to me. And so now I have 2 things. I have some facts and I have my feelings. Which one do I choose to believe? And so you intentionally engage this front part of your brain, the executive function, to choose, I am going to believe the fact over the feel. It's hard. It's easy for people who don't have anxiety. If you don't have anxiety, it's pretty simple because the front part of your brain's kind of running the show. People with anxiety, the back part of the brain's, it's on fire. And so it's really yelling. I try to describe it to people. It's like a bullhorn yelling in the back of your head. It's hard to ignore. But you can do it. It's not easy. If I walked up to you right now and had a bullhorn and put it right in your face and said, fire, 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 leave the building, and you were looking around and everybody was just laughing, you could probably ignore me. It'd be harder with the bullhorn. Okay, get the idea? All right, let's see how fast I can get up there. How did I do that, Doug? I'm a wonder at this stuff. Okay, I'm going to go really fast. Here we go. Now we're getting there. Okay. Next, focus on what you know and believe versus what you feel. That's kind of that's a summation of what I just told you. Okay? Focus on what you know and what you believe versus what you feel. Okay? When in that video, I don't know if you heard him, he says, now I'm going to teach you how to engage the prefrontal cortex in order to deal with your anxiety. That's it right there. Working on what you know and believe to tell the limbic system what's up versus have the limbic system tell you what's up. All right. Next trigger. Cognitive distortions. These are a bugger. These are just brutal. The brain rewires itself to over-exaggerate threats. Okay, overly negative expectations combined with this feeling of dread or danger. Okay, it basically lies to protect you. Have any of you had a mom, maybe your mom growing up, that over-exaggerated how dangerous something was to keep you from doing it? Okay, you're laughing. You had that mom. And you do that. Okay, of course. Parents do that all the time. Well, if you don't check your gas, you're going to get stuck out there and you'll freeze to death. Well, probably not. You know, maybe if they run out of gas, they'll have to wait for a while and get really cold. Not too many people actually freeze to death on the side of the road. It happens, but we're talking pretty rare. But almost every parent has said that phrase or something like that. Okay, you look out there like you're getting frostbite. Well, actually, in Calgary, that's real. Okay, so that's not an over-exaggeration. That's real. But my mom, the one I still remember, and it wasn't quite as bad as some of these, but I used to like to jump in piles of leaves in the backyard. My parents would rake them up, and then when I was a little kid, I'd run and jump. I mean, jumping in leaves, that's the best, right? And my parents, they would tell me to stop, and they'd even punish me, but it was like irresistible. So finally, my mom said, you can't jump in the leaves. There are worms in there, and you'll get worms if you jump in the pile of leaves. I believed her. And it was like literally 10 years later, one of my buddies in school was going through leaves, and I said something about worms, and they looked at me like I had an arm growing out of my chest. Like, what? Worms? And it was like it dawned on me, oh my gosh, my mom told me about worms when I was, I still believe. And I called her up, and like, you told me there were worms in the leaves. She got a laugh. She thought that was funny. See, parents will say things like that to protect kids all the time. Your limbic system is doing that a lot. The word cognitive distortion is basically a fancy word for saying your brain distorts what you think and see. And it can be really severe. I mean, and it is not as easy as just telling them not to believe it. They see it. Okay? They did an experiment where they had anxious people look at facial expressions, pictures of people with standard facial expressions. They had non-anxious people look at them and say, okay, what anxious? They labeled each expression. Happy, sad, nervous, bored. Okay? Then they had anxious people come in and do the same thing, and they saw different faces. Bored looked like apprehensive. Nervous looked afraid. Okay? Serious looked angry. You see what I mean? It was always interpreted negative. That's what it's doing to you. Your brain is interpreting what it sees in a biased, slanted, negative way. Okay, you got a piece of paper with you if you grab those out of the front. It should be a list of types of cognitive distortions. Take a look, you don't have to read it, just briefly, just look down through it. Those are the patterns of the types of distortion your brain uses to lie to you and tell you something bad's going to happen. Okay, these are anxiety standard distortions. Okay? Here's what it looks like in your brain. So, unstressed, unanxious brain, front part of the brain's running the show. Okay? The prefrontal cortex tells the limbic system what's up. When you're in anxiety, back part of the brain tells the prefrontal cortex where it can put it. Okay? This part runs the show. and it's telling you scary things. It's telling you things that aren't true. It's lying to you. And it's overriding the front part. Okay? So, what can you do? Recognize the patterns. I had a teacher in high school who used to give us fake tests and let us cheat on them on purpose. I loved that teacher. So they'd say, okay, we're going to have a test tomorrow. And then they'd say, okay, you can look in your book. And we're like, yeah, acing the test. Went home, Mom, I aced the test today. And the teacher was smiling because I became a teacher later and I realized what she was doing. It was just a study tool. It wasn't a test. She called it a test, so we felt really good about it. But it was just a way to, we had to look at the questions and look them up, and we write them in, and it was just studying. Except we were doing it where we're kind of intense, because it was a test, and so we remembered it better. Okay, pretty smart stuff. Okay, well, if you look at that sheet of paper, and you recognize those patterns, that's your cheat sheet. You experience any of those patterns, that is not the truth, that's your limbic system lying to you. That's like a cheat sheet. You look at it, and you go, ooh, my brain's doing that right now. You can go, it's not true then. It's one of those patterns Neil was telling us about that's lies. Okay, it's a way for you to be tricky, okay? Another tool, think of yourself like a judge, court case, and have a trial. Now, you know what judges do. They have the prosecution and the defense attorneys, give them all the facts. Then the judge just weighs the positive and the negative, and they say, this is what my decision is. Okay? You do the same thing. If you're worried about something, let's say you're afraid of something. I think if I come in with this much work done on my project, my boss will be really disappointed and I could lose my job. Okay? Don't just say, well, it's not true. Well, what if it is true? You can't just discount stuff. There's a basic rule in psychology, we don't believe our own BS. Okay? So you can't just tell yourself stuff that you want to be true even though you know it's not. You've got to decide whether it really is or not. Best way to do that? Have a trial. Look at both sides. Don't look at just one side. Don't look at all the positives. Look at the negatives. Put them both out there. And then use the front part of your brain, be the judge, and decide which is true. Not what you feel. By the way, how impactful are feelings in a court of law? What if a defense attorney gets up and says, Your Honor, I have no evidence, but I just feel like my client is innocent. I mean, I really feel it. I mean, I cannot tell you how much I feel this. Judge goes, you're fired. Get another lawyer. That guy's, disbar that person. Feelings have no place in a court of law. That's why that court case analogy works. If you just think, not about what I feel, what are the facts? Okay? And then be a judge. Okay? This one's important. Anxiety tries to sell you on the possible. Okay? Here's what I mean. You're going to a party with some friends. Well, maybe not friends. Let's say you have one friend. And they invite you to a party, a bunch of people you don't know. Anxiety tells you, what would anxiety tell you? That kind of setting. Going to a party, you have one friend, everybody else you don't know. What's the fear? No one's ever been to a party? That's right. I'm using an example no one even remembers. It's like, parties. Oh, yeah, I remember what those are. I saw those in a history book. Okay. I don't know about you, but what I get afraid of is things like, I'll go there, and they'll be the only person I know, and then someone else will start talking to them, and I'll be standing there alone. Okay? When you have just one friend at a party, that's my fear anyway. I don't know about you guys. Okay? Is that possible? Sure. Is it probable? That's a different question. You see, anxiety speaks to the possible. I'll give you an example. Let's say you got someone who's afraid of getting hit with an asteroid, a meteor. That's ridiculous, right? So I heard this story about an actual true case. Psychologist was working with this person. They had this unrealistic fear that an asteroid could hit them. Okay? So the psychologist said, okay, how do we deal with that? He thought, I'm going to bring in an astrophysicist. He brought an astrophysicist in. And the guy sat in for about 10 minutes in one of their sessions and explained to him how many meteors actually enter the Earth's atmosphere and how many actually make it through before burning up and how many actually hit the ground and how many actually hit people, in populated areas. And then even if it's a populated area, could it actually hit a person? And he could, this astrophysicist, absolute authority says, and so he says, the chance of you getting hit, he says, it's astronomical. And he said the person with the anxiety, their answer was, yeah, but it's possible. Well, yeah. Here's the thing. We don't operate off possible. None of us do. None of us make decisions based on what's possible. Okay? Is it possible your car is going to blow up when you start it, when you walk out in that? Is that possible? Is it probable? No. So you don't operate off possible, you operate off probable. Is it possible there's going to be a scorpion in your loo when you sit down tonight? Well, I guess if someone snuck in and put a scorpion, yeah. Is it probable? No. See, we operate off the probable, not the possible. And so the question you ask when you're anxious is not, is it possible this bad thing could happen? But you ask, is it probable? If it's probable, then certainly respond to it. That makes sense? Okay. All right. The acceptance approach. I don't know if you can see that little mountain goat. And this is kind of a whole different way of looking at anxiety. And it's basically a way of kind of accepting the idea of the things that anxiety tells you. Let's see. First thing is that anxiety is normal, okay, particularly in a pandemic. Accepting anxiety as normal actually lowers your anxiety. So just telling yourself, I'm going to be anxious. First day back from work, I've been gone for 2 weeks on a holiday. Yeah, night before I'm gonna have a pit in my stomach. Okay, that's normal. That's not bad. That's what humans do, a lot of them. First day back at school, you're going to be anxious. Okay? So you accept it. Instead of feeling like something's wrong because I'm anxious, you realize, oh, something's right because I'm anxious. I'm normal. Okay? Uncertainty. Not knowing what's going to happen. That's a part of life. People try to organize, structure, prepare their way so that there's no uncertainty. Well, that has a certain trigger to anxiety. And so realizing that being uncertain is what life is like. You're not going to know what tomorrow's going to show. You're not going to know how your presentation's going to turn out. You're not going to know what's going to happen with the job interview or the kid. You can't get yourself so certain and say, I don't want to have uncertainty. And so you accept uncertainty as part of life and you just go, hey, that's just part of life. I'm going to be unsure. And third, problems, difficulties, inevitable. Now here's why this is important. Parents, we accidentally trigger anxiety in our kids by trying to prepare them and get them to prevent bad things. Okay, we accidentally create anxiety in our kids by constantly trying to prevent bad things happening to them. Okay, so here's what it would look like. Kids going off to camp. Do you have your bug stuff? Could be bugs. You got your sunscreen. Don't want you to get a sunburn. Okay, you got extra snacks. They could run out of food. Okay, here's your phone in case you get nervous. Okay, and so what a parent does is they give their kids everything they can think of to prepare them for bad things and to try to prevent those bad things from happening. What does that teach a kid about life? Life is a buffet of bad things. And my job is to make sure I don't pick them. Okay, now, you can take that approach, and if you're really good, you can prevent 80, 90% of bad things. Except it's going to do two things. One, your kid is going to be terrified all the time and constantly trying to avoid bad stuff. Two, when bad things happen, well, the world's over. All my preparation didn't work and that bad thing happened. Okay? So what you really want to teach your kids is not how to avoid bad stuff, is how to handle them. You want to be confident, and I'm talking about kids, but it's us too, right? We don't want to be trying to avoid everything bad that happens. We want to believe we can deal with it when it does. Okay, I'm going to have bad stuff happen at work. My project is going to go sideways. It happens to all of us. So instead of trying to work overtime to say, I can never let anything bad happen at work, I can never get behind on a project or ever be unprepared for anything, we start thinking through, am I able to adapt? Am I able to deal with this? Can I be resilient when the bad things happen? Can I figure it out? You teach a kid to do that, and you're teaching a kid not to be anxious. Because no matter what happens, they figure they can deal it. Okay? Any questions about that part? Okay. I think we're going to stop there. There's a few other little anxiety triggers on your page. You can go down and look those your own. These are the smaller ones. Let's do some questions, things you want to, and it could be something on that page if there's something you want to cover. Thoughts you have here. Applications? Geez, yeah, ADHD is one.
What are some things that parents can watch for to sort of maybe examine the possibility of the latter further?
Of which one further?
Any kind of neurodiverse conditions, because obviously they overlap, and often anxiety can be misdiagnosed or maybe overlap.
You know, it's interesting. When you got those kind of symptoms, sometimes the best way to figure them out is to treat them. You know, the best diagnosis of ADHD is you give a kid Ritalin. If it helps, they had ADHD. If it doesn't, they didn't. Because ADHD can be similar to some other things. And so one of the best diagnostic tools we have is you treat anxiety. I do a little tool in my office where it's just a breathing exercise, and there's a specific type of breathing that triggers the limbic system to calm down. It's kind of, if you want to think about it, it's a sigh of relief. And so we just basically repeat a sigh of relief, and it triggers the limbic system to quiet down. If we do that in the office, and at the end of that 3-minute breathing pattern, they go like, wow, this feels different. Then your limbic system was fired up. Okay? If they finish it up and they go, that was nice. Yeah, I feel a little better. Relaxing. Then I go, okay, probably not what we were looking at. Okay? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I'm not sure what doctors prescribe, and like I thought you had done a diagnosis.
Yeah, obviously, you know, there's all kinds of great self-help tools online. I'm going to give you one website that is fantastic. anxietycanada.com. Okay? It is phenomenal. It's got tools for every age. It's self-help oriented, but there are diagnostic tools on there, things you can do to kind of look at, take a little test. I mean, obviously you can go to a psychologist and they can give an inventory and figure out anxiety pretty quickly. But if you're looking for something self-help, that'd be a good place to start. Yeah, the problem with some of these things is they are, like you said, neurodiverse. They're really tricky and interreactive. ADHD and anxiety are so similar. Sometimes it's just a little treasure hunt trying to figure out which one it is. Okay, good question. Anything else? All right. You guys want to, I'll sit around for another 10, 15 minutes or whatever. If you just want to talk and come up and say, hey, I got this issue, any ideas on how to deal with this? I'm happy to do that. Just, can't spend all night, but I'll do a few minutes. Okay. Josh, I think that's it, bud. Yeah.
So with dealing with anxiety, how do you deal with it? So my daughter has anxiety. She doesn't want to go back to school. I think it was a lot of
Yeah.
online school, back home to school, back
Yeah.
and forth.
Okay. That's a great question. The answer, the easiest answer is to tell you what not to do. You don't make her go. Her anxiety is going to do what? Okay, you will never get her there. Okay? So you cannot think in terms of, okay, I'm not saying that's, you just, buck up, kid, staple up your socks, get to school, It's not quite that simple. But the place you got to know you can't do is if your kid needs to be back at school, then you're going to have to get them there. Okay? So some of the ideas I gave you up there, gradual approach. Okay, you got to engage the cognition side of things, her thoughts and fears. What is she afraid of? What is she? And it doesn't have to be logical. There's some simple questions you ask. I'll give it to you. You just ask these two questions. Deep down, what are you afraid is going to happen? Okay, and then the second question, which is just as important as the first. If that happened, why would that be so bad? Okay, the first question gets you on the right track. The second question will get you to what they're really afraid of. So what are you afraid of? Well, I might get there and people don't like me. Well, why would it be so bad if people don't like you? Well, because I'd be alone. Okay, so what she's really afraid of is being alone.
Her issue is that she's going to miss us.
Okay, that's a feeling. That's not a fear. So there's a fear behind it. She's missing you because she's afraid of something. So there's almost always, without exception, a belief behind the anxiety. Something bad's going to happen when she's there. Now, parents, how old is she? 9. Okay, so at that age, and if she doesn't have a history of this, if this isn't just this kind of happened in the pandemic, you got a little kid that said it's dangerous, 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 dangerous. Their anxiety level's going up, 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 up. Now they're starting to feel fears about what happens when I go to school. So you need to be honest and say what you're feeling is this thing called anxiety. It's lying to you. And we've got to figure out what it's telling you. And so let's talk. Okay? And so you figure out what those fears are. They're there. Okay? She says it, I just feel better when I'm with you guys. What she misses is feeling safe. And so what you got to figure out is why school is unsafe. Okay? It's a good question. All right, Josh, I think we got it.
Actually, I want.
Yeah.
This kind of applies to many different settings, kids, university students. But there's, with COVID and as people go back to quote unquote normal life, there's still a lot of anxiety, and I think especially with as the news wraps up and we hear the daily COVID reports, what are some practical tools that we can do to kind of quote unquote get back into normal life per se, but still be informed. Like some people are saying, they're again avoiding, they're not watching the news, right? They're avoiding all the reports, we're just tired of it. Some that are totally into it, right? So what's the kind of balance?
Well, when it comes to this re-entering after COVID thing, you got to have a court case. You're going to have to decide what you think the facts are. Okay, I can't tell you the facts. I mean, I don't know. This world is so confusing right now. I'm just going to, you've got to figure out what you believe the truth is and what you believe the threat is and whether you feel it's worth the risk. You can't just operate off what you feel. If you operate off what you feel, you will not re-enter. Okay? So you weigh the actual facts. You look at cases. You look at the threats. You look at your vaccine level and your exposure level. And I mean, these are tough choices. This is real. This isn't a made-up pandemic, right? Okay? And so you're actually weighing factually, and then you're going to make a choice not on those feelings, because those feelings will say stay away. Okay? So for me, it was, I've got some susceptibilities, some, medical conditions that make me vulnerable. And so I had to kind of think it through, and then I just made a rock hard decision. When I have my second vaccine, 2 weeks later, I am normal. And I've been living under that until this stupid Delta showed up and started screwing around with us. And now I've got to redo it. I don't know what I'm going to decide. I haven't redone it yet. But I made my final decision regardless of what I felt. Now I'm going to have to reweigh the facts, reweigh the risk factors, and then I'm going to make another decision. I'm going to make it not based on what I feel. I'm going to make it based off what I know and what I choose to believe. Okay, regardless of my feelings, which are going to tell me to be afraid. Because that's what feelings do, at least mine do. Okay, does that help? Okay, good question. All right, folks. If you have any questions, I'll stick around a little bit. Thank you very much.